Steve, this just come through on the Twitter there. This is from Michelle Malkin. It says,
oh my goodness, Michelle Malkin joining us from Colorado Springs. The coffee machine's broken?
Wah.
You have no caffeine?
Wah.
That's right. I'm going to have to rely on my natural wake-up
adrenaline. This story is going to wake you up. Rolling Stone magazine has put on the cover a rather glamorous shot of the surviving Boston bomber. There are a number of people up in New England and across the country are absolutely...
Makes him look like a sex symbol.
It does glamorize him. A couple of stores have gone ahead and boycotted Rolling Stone, including CVS and Tedeschi Foods.
Stop and Shop.
Yeah. You feel that suddenly... there's the whole gambit of it. You say now Rolling Stone has become the tiger beat for terrorists, hasn't it?
Yeah, it really has. And I think people need to understand the context, the subtext, and the pretext here, because there's now a backlash to the backlash. And I think what people have to see is that this is a remarkable cultural milestone, I think, because it's not just right-wingers who are trying to, quote-unquote, manufacture outrage. You've got Democratic politicians, as you mentioned, Steve, in Massachusetts, Deval Patrick, and, of course, the Boston mayor, Tom Menino, who wrote a letter to Rolling Stone expressing his disgust at what is clearly the celebrification of the accused Boston bomber. You've got country stars and rock stars and pop stars and Hollywood stars all rushing to make clear that they do not condone this obvious cult of celebrity and
but guess
worship.
who does back it? Politico, Slate, the Washington Post
Good
blog.
journalism.
Yeah,
they say,
it's
come on, get over it, essentially.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that if you actually read the article, and I did take the time to do that, it's thousands and thousands of words of the same kind of moral equivalence that we get every time America is attacked by Islamic jihadists. And they have all sorts of excuses. They want to humanize him. They want him to make clear that this is a deeply complex issue. I think they need to do what a lot of readers did yesterday and recommended, which is, why don't you put 8-year-old Martin Richard on the cover? Why don't we have some profiling of the humanity of the victims who are living with the consequences of this?
Or maybe Richard Donahue, because he was one of the police officers who was shot in Boston. And he just did an interview this morning. He discusses this Rolling Stone cover. Here's his thoughts.
There's a number of people they could have picked for a rock or entertainment magazine, you know, beside an alleged bomber. But I hope it doesn't glorify him and make it so other people will follow in his footsteps.
But Michelle, my question for you this morning is why? Is it as simple as have we gotten this simplistic that it's all to sell magazines?
Yes, it is. I mean, just do a search on internet search for Rolling Stone cover, and you'll see that that is prime real estate for celebrifying left-wingers and left-wing causes. The publisher is Jan Wenner, of course, who's a big Obama supporter, big-time cultural lib, and of course, whoever they put on the cover there is to get eyeballs and get people to read the magazine. And they know, look, this, and they mention it in the article, that this comes in the context of all of these young women who have formed a groupie fangirl club and are standing there at the courthouse with their Free Jahar signs. They know the guy, in many eyes, is a quote-unquote sex symbol, America's next heartthrob. That's the headline that they used when they put Justin Bieber on the cover. They might as well have used it for this.
I just got a tweet from somebody saying, waiting on, and then they've inserted the name of the store they go to announce that they won't sell the magazine anymore. They were so quick to dump Paula Deen, and she didn't kill anybody.
Yeah, good point. I mean, the double standards here are overflowing.
Let's talk a little bit about Attorney General Eric Holder, because he's been talking a lot about the Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman case and stand your ground situation. So some people are saying, you know, should he go forward with any kind of a civil rights case? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, he opened it up last year. Quietly, they've left it open, I think, as their option in case what actually happened. But I think it's more significant that he went down there to Florida to address NAACP leaders who already had their ducks all in a row demanding a federal intervention. And what did he do? He name-dropped the Stand Your Ground laws, which have been sort of a hobby horse for the far left and your Soros organizations, predating the Zimmerman case. And I think that's what's significant here, is that they'll use any excuse to try and limit their political opponents' free speech and political activity. And I think it's important to note the background that many of these groups were going after political and conservative organizations like ALEC for supporting things like the Stand Your Ground laws. This isn't really about Stand Your Ground. And in my column today, of course, I quoted prosecutors who said, this isn't about Stand Your Ground. Stand Your Ground had nothing to do with this. It wasn't invoked. Zimmerman had waived his rights to the process involving Stand Your Ground.
So it's a fake? Is this a head fake?
It's a squirrel.
Yes, it is a squirrel. That's what I called it. And I think it's a very useful metaphor. This is a weapon of mass distraction. And I think people have to understand this as a political tool to go after their enemies again.
Well, it's interesting, last night on Special Report, Bret Baier talked about the statistics in Florida with regard to race, since it's been the discussion for the last week, with regard to Stand Your Ground. And it turns out that more African Americans actually used that defense and used it successfully than Caucasians. So if we're going to really discuss this, down into race and the differences, the Department of Justice maybe should look into those stats as well. In the meantime, should the United States boycott the Russian Olympics now over Edward Snowden, if he is actually going to get asylum and stay in that country?
Yeah. This is a proposal by Lindsey Graham, and essentially my reaction is I think it's time for the voters of South Carolina to boycott Lindsey Graham. I think at this point it's a ridiculous proposal. He hasn't been granted asylum yet, and I think there are a lot of Lindsey Graham's own Republican colleagues who think that this would be a punishment of Olympic athletes in the United States. I also think that it's an opportunity for the U.S. to examine its own stupid asylum policies that have endangered Americans. We ought to look inward first.
But just for the record, I differ there. I like Senator Graham's a good friend to the show. But Senator Graham should go, what about September? Hey, we're not doing our summit in September. We are not going over to Moscow. That's a bigger deal than staying home and not going to the Olympics.
Good point, and it wouldn't punish all of these hardworking athletes. There are good reasons to boycott Russia and the Olympics. I don't think this is at the top of my list.
All right, Michelle Malkin, I told you, these talking points, you wouldn't need coffee, am I right?
That's right.
There you go, very nicely done.
We are your can of Jolt. Thank you very much. Michelle, thanks. See you soon. Coming up.